Okay, hi. We're looking at Song of Solomon, verses 6 through 11, the last part of chapter 3. I've been taking 20 minutes per teaching. This is only going to be a little more than 5 minutes. I think it's going to be pretty quick. There's just one basic idea in this passage, a couple basic ideas maybe, and that will be it. Okay, this is again a very big switch from the previous song. This song is very different in tone again. Let me read it first, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. It says, "What is this coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all scented powders of the merchant? Behold, it is the traveling couch of Solomon. 60 mighty men around it, of the mighty men of Israel. All of them are wielders of the sword, expert in war. Each man has his sword at his side, guarding against the terrors of the night. King Solomon has made for himself a sedan chair. From the timber of Lebanon, he has made its posts of silver. He made its posts of silver, its back of gold, and its seat of purple fabric, with its interior lovingly fitted out by the daughters of Jerusalem. Go forth, O daughters of Zion, and gaze on King Solomon with the crown with which his mother has crowned him on the day of his wedding, on the day of his gladness of heart." And that is it. All right, so several things. First of all, the shepherd hypothesis versus the standard view. I'm taking the standard view. Now, if you took the shepherd hypothesis, then you assume that this book is a story about it's a love story with a love triangle, with the shepherdess in love with the shepherd, and Solomon comes and sort of takes her away from the shepherd, but in the end they get back together. And in that case, you'd see this whole thing as kind of a negative passage that is talking about the pomp and circumstance of Solomon, but it sort of wins her away or maybe forces her away from the shepherd, and that he's coming to claim her in marriage. And that's one way to see it. I'm reading this with the standard view, in which case this is not a negative thing at all, it's a positive thing. And the wealth and the luxury and the power and the riches of Solomon here is seen as kind of romantic and as a positive picture. That makes it easier to take it metaphorically for God, by the way, of course. If it was the shepherd hypothesis and you were taking it metaphorically, you'd assume it was metaphorical for the temptations of the world or something. But here, I'm assuming that this is a picture of a king like Solomon, it names him, of King Solomon as being this incredibly powerful, majestic, awesome king with all this power and pomp and circumstance, and yet he's coming to take his bride whom he loves. And that is that picture. And this blend of his awesomeness and his love for her is the point of the passage. All right, so that's the first thing. The second thing is who's speaking. I think if you look at this, it seems to be spoken of not by the woman, but by just sort of a narrator, or maybe the daughters of Jerusalem. But I think it's just spoken sort of by a singer about Solomon, saying, "Look, what is this coming up from the wilderness?" The third thing is spiraling in. Yes, okay. Each of these 4 slides, what's happening here, it's very visual. It's giving us a picture of what's happening. What is this coming up from the wilderness? It's supposed to evoke your imagination and get you thinking about it, seeing it in your head, seeing it in your mind's eye. And what it's doing is it's spiraling in closer and closer, so that you start just looking at everything as a whole, and then you move in a little further and a little further and a little further still. And so I want you to see that happening. First, what is this coming up from the wilderness? So it asks a question to get you to notice it. It's like coming up from the wilderness here. Here comes something. It looks like columns of smoke. And then it says perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the scented powders of the merchant. So I think it not only looks like columns of smoke, there's lots of perfume and incense in the air. So it smells like smoke and incense. And the picture is it's this big spectacle. Something huge is happening. And if you're on the bystander, you'd be saying, what is going on? Coming up from the wilderness perhaps means that this is Solomon coming. It means that Solomon is traveling upwards somewhere. Now, Jerusalem was on a hill, so a lot of people think, this is sort of what I imagine, that he's gone to get his bride, and he's coming back to Jerusalem for the wedding, and he's coming up to Jerusalem, out of the wilderness, up into Jerusalem, and the whole city is agog and looking to see, oh, here he comes, here he comes. What is that? Oh, that's Solomon, here he comes. But it's also possible that the shepherdess lived in it looks like a hilly country, so it's also possible he's coming from Jerusalem with all this big retinue, all his retainers and so on, and that they're heading up to her village to get her. Either way, who is this coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all scented powders of the merchant? Notice that it's very luxurious. It's very rich. It's very sensory. It's beautiful in terms of the senses and the fragrances, and that it's big and spectacular, again, breathtaking. Then you zoom in a little bit. You don't just see the big smoke and the big to-do. You zoom in and you see, behold, look, it's the traveling couch of Solomon. It's like he's being carried along in kind of a little traveling bed or couch. 60 mighty men around it, of the mighty men of Israel. All of them are wielders of the sword, expert in war. Each man has his sword at his side, guarding against the terrors of the night. Now, it could be that this means there's some kind of danger, but I don't think so. I think this is just showing that he is so important that he's got bodyguards around him, 60 different mighty soldiers, and it's describing how skilled they are and how powerful they are to show his power. This king is so important, Solomon is so important, that he's got 60 of the mighty men of Israel around him, expert wielders of the sword, expert at guarding against the terrors of the night. I don't think we're supposed to actually be thinking that this is nighttime or that there are any terrors. We're supposed to just think, wow, what an amazing thing that here they come. And so we see, first of all, just it looks like smoke from a distance. And then we zoom in and we see these 60 mighty men, the traveling couch in the middle, and then all these soldiers around it. And then we zoom in a little bit closer to the chair itself, the couch itself. King Solomon has made for himself a sedan chair, a chair he can recline in, from the timber of Lebanon. This is the very most expensive, luxurious timber. He's made his posts of silver, and its back of gold, and his seat of purple fabric. So it's all very rich and beautiful, with his interior lovingly fitted out. Probably means very ornate and ornamented, or maybe it means there's like pillows and cushions and things in there, by the daughters of Jerusalem. So you can see he has all these men surrounding him as guardians. You can see he has all the daughters of Jerusalem working for him as to create this and make it the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen. And this is what he travels in. This is he's traveling in grand style. And we've zoomed in, so we start with this, just it looks like smoke from a distance, and then we zoom in to see all the people surrounding it, then we zoom in and see the sedan chair itself, and finally we zoom in and see him. Go forth, O daughters of Zion, gaze on King Solomon, with the crown with which his mother has crowned him on the day of his wedding, and on the day of his gladness of heart. So he's been crowned with a crown. Now he is a king, and he would have been crowned with his father's crown, with the crown of King David, long ago when he became king. But this talks about being crowned with the crown or the wreath with which his mother has crowned him. So this is like some sort of a wedding wreath or a wedding crown. And she has crowned him not to mark his coronation as king, but to mark the day of his gladness of heart, the day of his wedding, the day that he will take his bride. And so it's interesting because as it zooms in, it also suddenly becomes more personal. It starts by saying how majestic, how awe-inspiring, how spectacular, and then gets closer and closer, how rich, how powerful, and then it gets to this. And there's a very personal human touch. It's his mother's crown. Not David's crown, but Bathsheba's crown. His mother's crown. It's the crown she's given him. And it's the crown of his wedding. And it specifically says this is the day of his wedding. So this is a wedding ceremony, or leading to the wedding. It's the wedding procession. And it says, on the day of his gladness of heart. And that last phrase in the whole song is the key to the whole song, because it turns a corner and brings a little surprise in. Instead of just talking about how amazing this is, how spectacular this is, talking about him, his pomp, and his circumstance, it talks all of a sudden about the fact that this is the day that's bringing him gladness. So he's got power, he's got reach, he's got luxury, he's got riches, but this is the day when he gets gladness, when he gets joy. What brings him gladness and joy isn't all his wealth, it isn't his sedan chair, it isn't his 60 mighty warriors, it's the woman that he loves. And it isn't something that he's looking to from his father, he inherited the kingdom from him, it's something that he looks to from his mother, who is concerned for his happiness and for his personal welfare, and concerned that he be happy, that he be joyful. And that's the day of his wedding. And that's the end of the song. So it's this spiraling in, moving in closer and closer, starts with looking at his awesomeness, and ends up by saying, sort of surprisingly, this is the day which makes him glad. This is the day which fills him with joy and completes his life in a way that none of the other stuff he had ever did. And that says a lot about his love for the bride as well. So that's kind of the picture. All right. So is that everything I wanted to say? Yes. Now, the metaphor here is really pretty clear. The picture for love is this interesting contrast between his awesomeness, his amazing, his sort of spectacle, and the personal touch at the end, when this is what brings him gladness. And from the point of view of the woman, if this is seen positively, then this is it's kind of a romantic thing that this rich, powerful, all-powerful man would care more about taking her as his bride than about all this other stuff. That she's the one who makes him happy. She's the one who completes him and fulfills him. And that's kind of the essence in some ways of romance. This is a very unique blend of the masculine feeling of the king being powerful and rich and able to get anything he wants, and the feminine feel of that his mother and his bride are the ones who are seeing that he's happy, seeing that he is personally fulfilled, seeing that he loves and is loved. Okay, so for us, the metaphor is really interesting because it combines the majesty of God with the surprise of the fact that he's glad in us, that we are to him gladness of heart, not because he didn't know that about us and he saw us and thought, wow, those people are so holy, they really make me glad, but because of what he has done and how he has reached us. It's the picture that Jesus is standing in heaven waiting to come and get his bride, and that's us. So I think what this just reminds us of and calls us up, boy, this took me a lot more than 5 minutes, didn't it? It's like 12 minutes. Okay, what this reminds us of is on the one hand the majesty and the fearsomeness of God in worship. But on the other hand, this curious intimacy that he takes joy in us. He's glad in us. We are delighted in him. He delights in us. And knowing that God delights in me is enough for me. I don't need anybody else to tell me how valuable I am or I'm not. If God delights in me, that is all that I need. And I love this picture that this majestic, fearsome God delights in us. I saw somebody in a Facebook post just today talking about when we pray, we tend to think so much of as God as our friend that we lose the sense of reverence for him. Well, I don't think the two have to be against each other. There's this paradox, there's this tension, there's this mystery that God is an awesome God, and yet a God who's close to us, who adopts us as his children, who speaks of us as friend, and who sees us as the bride of Christ. And all that's sort of caught up in this. Okay, see you next week. Goodbye.